Ajmal, let me start with you. What have I got wrong about this?
Terminology. You called it Islamic extremist or extremism. If I say something is Islamic, I actually give it a glorified accolade. So, for example, if somebody says you're being Islamic, it means you're being good, you're being decent, you're being a God-fearing, God-conscious, a person of integrity, honesty, and truthfulness, and so on. Good traits. Terrorism and extremism are not good traits, and they cannot be called Islamic. It's like calling a pig kosher. Pigs can't be kosher. Pigs are pigs, and kosher meat doesn't include pigs. It is important to make that distinction. By calling these heinous crime, these terrorist attacks, Islamic, you're glorifying them. You are tarnishing an entire community by this term. In fact, you're actually misapplying the term. It's misuse of term, and it is unfair. It is, I believe...
Would you like to describe
hold on. It is very lazy journalism as far as I'm concerned. And if we want to be intellectual about it, let's discuss the terminology.
How would you describe someone who is radicalized by Islamic hate preachers and then commits a terrorist atrocity? How would you describe
Islamic hate preachers, you can't use those three words in the same English sentence. One can't be Islamic and a hate preacher. A hate preacher is un-Islamic. The terminology is very important. When I say
how would you describe Anjem Choudhury, for example?
An extremist, a nutter. I've called him a nutter on his face. I have called him a criminal on his face. I've called him an abuser on his face. I've called him somebody who is a charlatan looking for attention. But I would never give him the honor of Islamic, because the word Islam, if you use it as a prefix before anything, it automatically glorifies the person. An Islamic person means the person is good and decent, law-abiding, a person who makes a contribution to the well-being of humanity, doesn't kill people, doesn't go around blowing people. So terminology is so important, and I make that distinction. I'm with you in the sense that what happened to the MP, Sir David, is awful. I stood for parliamentary election twice. I know what it means to be at the receiving end of threats. I live with 2 death threats in my life from the extremists. I would never call them Islamic, because by calling them Islamic, we are dishonoring Islam. We are being dishonest to 1.8 billion Muslims' sentiment. And most importantly, we're misusing the terminology. Call them extremists.
Okay.
Just like
Rakib Hassan, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think in terms of the terminology, I refer to an Islamist extremism. That's when I'm talking about the terror-related killing of Sir David Emis, we're talking about potential links with Islamist extremism. And I think it's important to make that differentiation. And I think it's really important to make the point that Southend Mosques, for example, they issued a joint statement. And when I read the statement, it was incredibly moving. What was very clear was that Sir David Emis was a genuine friend to his local Muslim constituents, and he was a fantastic source of support, almost as if he was a much adored community elder. And I think that when we're looking at the British Muslim population more generally, Dan, when you look at the survey data, the vast majority believe that Britain is a good place to live as a Muslim. The comfortable majority are worried about the threat of Islamist extremism, and a comfortable majority would also report radicalization risks to the relevant public authorities. So I think in terms of the question, why are certain members of the mainstream media and our political elite, why are they reluctant to discuss Islamist extremism? It's because they believe that if they robustly discuss Islamist extremism, that in itself is a form of anti-Muslim prejudice. But I'd make the point that is the bigotry of low expectations, because the vast majority of British Muslims are patriotic, law-abiding, communitarian, and they are concerned about the impact of Islamist extremism in British society.
Ismail?
I want to respond to that. I understand the need for getting the terminologies right. Are we going to be consistent? So, for example, if a Christian person was to perpetrate a terrorist crime, are we going to call them Christian terrorists? Are we going to call the Buddhist who have been killing the Rohingya Muslims Buddhist terrorists? Are we going to call anyone?
If they were doing it in the name of Jesus Christ, then yes, we would. Then yes, so if we're going to be,
If we are consistent with our use of terminology, fair enough. Then let's use the terminology and understand. But there is a bigger repercussion to using any terminology. For example, yourself, Dan, in your one sentence, I was listening to you in the previous debate, you interchanged between Islamic and Islamist without even realizing that you're doing that regularly. Do you know more than 80% of your listeners would be confused by the use of term? They would think, oh, Islam means terrorism. This subliminal association comes by the word Islam. Let's not use it, because Islam is a religion of a massive amount of people, 1.8 billion people. If 1.8 billion people were terrorists, the world would be a hell. They're law-abiding, they're great people.
Yes, of course,
they've made
but a small percentage are radicalized. And
so therefore, we don't call them by the name of the religion of the majority. We call them terrorists.
But Dr. Hassan, is that not just avoidance? Is that not just avoidance?
We're not avoiding the cause. The cause isn't Islam. The cause are other issues. Islam did not tell them to become extreme or terrorist. Islam told them not to.
Dr. Hassan?
Well, I'd make the point that in terms of what Imam Ajmal has said, I've referred to terrorists in the United States as anti-Jewish Christian fundamentalists. So I try to be as consistent as possible in terms of applying terminology in relation to terrorist attacks. I think that when we're looking at the problem of Islamist extremism, I really would make this point. Robustly discussing Islamist extremism, forms of radicalization within British Muslim communities is not a form of anti-Muslim prejudice, because as I've referred to the survey data, much like the wider general public, a comfortable majority of British Muslims are concerned by the impact of Islamist extremism. And I think that members of the mainstream media, members of our political classes really need to recognize that by de-emphasizing the impact of Islamist extremism on our society, we look at the terror-related killing of Sir David Emmis. We've heard about our confrontational political culture. We've had a confrontational political culture for a very long time. That largely stems from our two-party system. We're hearing discussion about social media anonymity. It's quite remarkable how the discourse and narrative surrounding the terror-related murder of Sir David Emmis is so divorced from reality. And for me, it's very disappointing to see.
Mal, I'll give you the final word, but I think that is the genuine concern, actually, from my point of view. Most political leaders and most of the media are doing exactly what you want. But I would say that's not discussing a very, very real problem that we have in this society, because there's thousands and thousands of more young men like this alleged killer who have been radicalized and are waiting to commit terrorist atrocities. And if we don't talk about it, this is going to keep happening again and again.
Dan, I want to agree, but I don't want to also have you conflate the figure. You said thousands and thousands. I think that's also a very scary scenario to paint. That's not true.
Well, it is true. It's absolutely true.
It's thousands and thousands. It's not true,
absolutely true. The MI5 last year said they were investigating 3,000 extremists with another.
How many of them were convicted of terror-related
potential radicals? Plus,
how many of them convicted?
No, but they're not convicted. That's the point. They are being radicalized right now in the UK.
You can't call them terrorists if they're not convicted.
I didn't call them terrorists. I said they were investigating 3,000 extremists with another pool of 40,000 potential radicals. And I'm not saying they are all Islamist either, but I think a large proportion of them are.
85,000 potential pedophiles lurk in our midst. If I say thousands and thousands of pedophiles are in our midst, that would be alarming the society. It would not be a genuine conversation. Let's have an honest conversation with ourselves, Zan. What's the problem? The problem is we have some people who think they can take the law into their own hand and do this, or they can terrorize us and derail and hijack our democracy, our faith, our way of life. That's the problem. How do we challenge it? By creating a narrative of inclusion. Let's bring everyone together. By calling a group of people who are Muslim and giving these idiots Islam or Islamist or Islamic terminology, you're already alienating vast majority of the Muslims. I want to create an inclusive narrative. I want to defeat these idiots together. I want to live freely like you. I don't want to live under 2 death threats. I want my children to realize that this world is a good place, not that their father has to look over his shoulder. Somebody
well,
makes
we can agree on. That we can absolutely agree on.
How do we do that? Let's create a narrative that is inclusive.
Okay, well, look, we will continue this discussion. It's been absolutely fascinating. That is Asmal Masroor and Iman in London, and also joined by Dr. Rakib Ehsan, the Research Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society and a columnist too for The Telegraph. Thank you both so much. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.